Hey guys, quick video about my Dell R610 server. So it's a 1U rack mount server which I just have slid below the desk here in my office. I'm using it as a home server, primarily just for home file sharing, networking, Pi-hole ad blocking and such. When I get my AT&T jack relocated to over here, I will be running it with a pfSense firewall, but for now I'm having to make do with a silly little USB Wi-Fi dongle, so it's not really able to intervene between my ISP and my home network at the moment. But the main thing I want to focus on this video is the upgrade potential of these. So this is I believe, a 2010 model. It's a first generation, and the year is 2020 just now. And I wanted to show how much you can actually do to these for not a whole lot of money. So right now I have it running Ubuntu 18.04, and I know most guys with a server will have it running either headless, or maybe it's running some VMs with just a hypervisor running on the actual system itself, as far as the local storage and such. But I'm not an IT guy, and I'm not a gamer. I just wanted to have a kind of a cushy user experience, so that's why I chose Ubuntu as the host OS. And I mean, it's still in the background, of course, serving files on my home network, and I guess I could be using it for OpenVPN if I wanted to, and it's running a Pi-hole DNS level ad blocking. But it's quite a nice OS, and I'm gonna just kind of walk through some of the upgrades I've done to it. Then we'll cut off the server and open the case and have a look around the inside. So the main things that have been done are CPU upgrade. So there's hard info here. So I've gone ahead and added two Xeon X5675s. So this is a dual socket server, so it can run two Xeons. And the Generation 1 motherboard, the highest CPU wattage it can handle is 95 watt TDP. So this CPU here, the X5675, is as good as it's going to get, unfortunately, unless I wanted to spring for a second gen motherboard, in which case I could be looking at an X5690, but to me it's just diminishing returns for the kind of work I do, which is very little. The server is pretty much just a home network and kind of just kicking back machine. So you can see here we've got 96 gigs of RAM nominally. You can see, I'll open it up later, but it's a bunch of 8 gig DIMMs. I believe DDR3 1066. And not a whole lot to say on this screen. So it's not really showing my graphics card, but we'll come to that. So display. It is running, so it's an NVIDIA GT 1030. I know it's not super high-end, but we're working with a 1U server here, and it seemed like the best I could do. But we'll come back to that later. It is running an actual NVIDIA driver, not this X.org Novo driver. Not much to say. I mean, the RAM's not quite maxed out, but I can't really see a need to go more than 96 gigs on this system. Even 16 gigs would more than do me, I think, for what I'm doing. As far as storage, we are running a NVMe SSD, not SATA, the actual NVMe M.2. And to do that with this motherboard, I did have to use Clover boot disk, and I'll kind of come back to that later. I'm not a huge benchmark guy, but I did do a baseline benchmark here. This is on the left with the stock CPUs, which was the Xeon E5530, which was an early 2009 vintage chip. There were 8 cores each, hyper-threaded to be 16 threads. And over here, we've got the new ones, which are hex cores, also hyper-threading. This was early 2011, so we're still talking about technology that's essentially a decade old. The 2 years did seem to make quite a bit of difference here. If we look at our single core, we're up almost 30%, and the multi-threaded score is essentially double. And the most intensive thing that I do is probably watch YouTube. So clearly an essential upgrade for me. So we'll go ahead and power this down. I don't think there's anything else really much to show here. Let me just kind of close out of this. And then we'll show you a boot up on the way back. It's pretty snappy. So I'm going to try and do this all in one take so I can avoid opening a video editing program and trying to splice things together. But I kind of have it set up so I can just slide this out. It's on rollers and just it's really easy to get inside a server. R610 is no exception. And this is the Power Mac G5. I might make a second video about that, but most of my content on this channel is automotive. I don't know. If you're interested, just let me know. So kind of going, I guess we'll start at the front here. We already talked about the USB dongle. This is 802.11 AC. Pretty much the best I can do until I have an actual like physical Ethernet connection. So here there is an internal USB port and an internal SD card. I'm currently not utilizing this. When I first got the server, I was using it to boot a Linux distribution locally. You could use it for booting a hypervisor, but at the moment I'm not using it. This is just a cheap USB key that I'm using to boot a Clover bootloader through UEFI, and that allows me to boot to this NVMe SSD, which we'll come to in a second. Up front, we've got 6 hard drive bays. You can mount, I'm pretty sure, just 2.5 inch, maybe 3.5 inch. I'm not sure. I managed to pick up on eBay just a bulk lot sale of, let's see if I can find one here. These guys are just laptop hard drives, 1 terabyte, and 2.5 inch, just your standard laptop 5400 RPM hard drive, so you can get a dime a dozen. So I've got all 6 installed here, and they have these quick release carriers, which is nice. You just pull the, where is it? Yeah, you gotta push the button, and they slide. They're hot swappable, so even if the machine's running and you lose a drive, you just pop your spare drive in, and it is in RAID 6, so it will just rebuild. These are fed through this, I think it's an H700 PERT card, which is just essentially a RAID controller, which controls all of these and interfaces with the OS, BIOS really, as well as just a virtual drive. So it shows up as just one drive, which is cool. So I'm using this, just like I said, for just home server needs, hosting my files and backups and videos and TV shows to stream to just my Apple TV and such. I'm using Kodi on that. So it's nice and convenient. The movies I've already paid for, I can watch without buying them again. So quite a good number of fans, 8 fans here. It is loud compared to I guess like a desktop tower, but it's a server. Here's the RAM. This is ECC server memory matched, and it's fully populated. I guess I could go. I think the Xeons that I put in are, I want to say 200 something gigabytes of RAM supported, but it's, to me, kind of seems like just spending money for not a whole lot of gain in my personal situation. And these are of course the CPUs themselves, really easy to change. I mean, flip this lever, flip that lever, off comes the heatsink, and then it's your bog standard little socket. Flip the cover back, and away you go. And moving forward here. So if you look closely, you'll notice these are actually riser cards. So you have 2 PCI Express by 16, and then these riser cards come out, and you've got an X8 here, and there's not really an X8 on this side, but on this one you do. So here's your other PCI Express lane. You've got an X8 slot, and then an X8 slot here for your RAID card. On this X8, what I've done is gone ahead and Dremeled off the back cap, and I've put in this GT1030. It's a low profile card, and I know there are better cards out there, but as far as fitting in a 1U server, and the fact that, I don't know if it's just these systems, but I know it's a lot of these Dell 1U servers of the time period, there's a 25 watt cap on this PCI X8 slot. So during BIOS or boot, it's actually checked, and you'll get an error if your card's drawing more than 25 watts. So with that restriction in mind, as well as the physical form factor of it, this seemed like the best bang for the buck. And like I said, I'm not a gamer. I don't really need the latest and greatest graphics card. And you can see here, I just have it going out to it has a DVI and an HDMI port, so nothing too exotic. And then here's the NVMe SSD. It's an X4 and an X8 slot, and I've got a little heatsink. But the SSD itself is a Samsung Evo 970. It's 256 gigs. I think I paid around $65 for this, and then maybe $5 to $10 for the adapter card. And so that goes in very nicely. But again, the motherboard being 2010 vintage does not natively boot from these guys, so I had to kind of have an intermediate step where it instead boots to this flash drive, which then has the driver loaded, which can see this, and then it boots. You would never know the difference. So I think I'm gonna say $60 to $70 I paid for this, $60 to $70 for the SSD, the RAM and everything. That came with a server. I was gifted the server from a friend who actually works in the technology industry, so that was pretty sweet. But you can pick these rigs up for well under $500. Say check Craigslist and eBay. They're pretty cheap, being 10 years old now. And the Xeons, I paid about $50 for both delivered. Maybe it was $55. So we're not talking about a whole lot of investment here to max out the system to the gills. The power supplies did need to be upgraded, primarily after adding the video card and the NVMe drive. I was getting these PSU errors, and so I had to go down to 16 gigs of RAM, pull out all but 2 of these DIMMs, and then everything was happy. I had the little, you can see how it's orange now. That means that there's something wrong. It's going to say that there's a case intrusion detected, because I have the case off, and there's a little sensor here that if I hold that down, it'll shut up. Yeah, takes a second, but anyway. So the maximum ones that I could find were 717 watts each, and like most servers, you're going to find it's actually got dual redundant power supplies. So the Stalkers, I have them back here. I think they were 505 or something like that. 502. So they just slide in. They're hot swappable, just like a lot of parts on this. So you just pull this little lever and you can install new ones in essentially 10 seconds. But yes, so I think that was $35 shipped to my door for both. They look just like that, and they just slide in. So 717 watts and then a backup for it. And everything's fine. I'm sure I'm kind of pushing the limit of those with all the RAM and the graphics card and the NVMe storage. But yeah, of course the 295 watt TDP CPUs. But let's go ahead and put the cover back on, and we'll go through the boot up. Actually, you know what? It takes about like 5 minutes to boot up, and this is already a 13-minute video. Maybe I won't do that, but you can take my word for it that it's quite a long boot up process. But all in all, I'd say bang for the buck. This is a system that you can put together for really cheap, and with some cost-effective upgrades, it can actually be a pretty competent computer 10 years later. Anyway, guys, hope you enjoyed that. Leave a comment down below if you have any questions or good ideas of cool things I could do with this server besides home networking needs. I'm always interested in stuff like that, and it's a cool project, then I'll at least look into it. Anyway, have a great rest of your day.